Most people think intelligence looks obvious. Fast answers, perfect grades, confidence in crowded rooms. But some of the rarest forms of intelligence develop quietly, in private, almost invisibly. They appear in the habits people build when nobody is watching. In the strange ways certain minds learn to survive loneliness, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. And if you do certain things alone, there's a chance your mind developed differently from most people around you. Not because life was easier for you, usually because it wasn't. You probably learned very early that being alone felt safer than feeling misunderstood, safer than explaining emotions nobody seemed to understand correctly. So instead of expressing everything outwardly, you started building an entire world internally. And over time, that inner world became incredibly detailed. One of the first signs is that you replay conversations after they end. Tiny moments, tiny reactions, the sentence someone almost said, the hesitation hidden behind a smile. You notice emotional details most people move past instantly. At some point, you stopped listening only to words. You started listening for patterns. That kind of awareness rarely appears randomly. It usually develops in people who grew up around emotional unpredictability, when moods changed suddenly, when tension could enter a room without warning, when silence sometimes felt heavier than shouting. Your nervous system adapted by becoming observant. You learned to read people quickly because your brain believed awareness could keep you emotionally safe. Years later, people call you perceptive without realizing perception was once survival. And maybe that's why being alone affects you differently. Silence does not empty your mind, it activates it. Your thoughts become louder, deeper, more connected. You reflect on interactions for hours, sometimes days. Not because you enjoy suffering, because your mind naturally searches for meaning underneath behavior. And that leads to another thing intelligent people often do alone. They spend long periods appearing inactive while internally processing everything. Lying awake at night, walking slowly without music, staring out of windows, listening to the same song repeatedly because it touches something difficult to explain. To other people, it looks unproductive. But internally, your brain is reorganizing emotions, memories, and patterns all at once. Highly intelligent people often have rich internal lives because they are not just experiencing reality, they are trying to understand it. That's why certain realizations hit you harder than they hit other people. You notice how loneliness changes someone's personality, how shame hides itself inside humor, how emotionally exhausted people smile differently. You notice when someone is trying too hard to appear okay. And once you become aware of those things, ordinary interactions stop feeling ordinary. There's a quiet sadness that comes with deep awareness, because intelligence is not always comforting. Sometimes it means recognizing emotional truths too early. Sometimes it means sensing distance before relationships fully fall apart. Sometimes it means understanding exactly why something hurts while still being unable to stop the pain itself. That becomes exhausting, especially when your mind never fully stops observing. You walk into rooms and immediately feel emotional tension. You notice shifts in energy before words even appear. You sense when affection feels forced. You sense when someone's kindness contains hidden resentment. And after years of noticing everything, your nervous system becomes tired in ways that are difficult to describe. But there's another behavior that often appears in highly intelligent people. They teach themselves constantly when they are alone. Not because somebody asked them to, not for attention, not even for achievement sometimes. Curiosity becomes automatic. You fall into deep rabbit holes late at night. Psychology, human behavior, trauma, philosophy, art, memory, attachment, the hidden meaning behind ordinary things. Because somewhere deep down, you are trying to understand more than information. You are trying to understand people, maybe even yourself. And that matters more than most people realize. For many emotionally aware people, knowledge becomes a form of safety. If you can understand pain deeply enough, maybe it becomes less frightening. If you can explain behavior clearly enough, maybe unpredictability stops feeling dangerous. So your mind turns into a flashlight searching through dark emotional spaces. But intelligent people rarely notice how unusual their inner world actually is because it feels normal to them. They assume everybody spends hours reflecting after conversations. Everybody questions their own behavior constantly. Everybody revisits memories trying to understand where certain emotional patterns began. Most people distract themselves before reaching those depths. You stayed there. And that changes a person slowly. It also explains why shallow conversations often drain you faster than silence. You crave emotional honesty, but most people protect themselves with surface-level interactions. So you learn to keep many thoughts private. Not because you are fake, because translating your inner world into simple words feels impossible sometimes. There are emotions inside you that feel too layered to explain casually. So over time, you became skilled at appearing calm while carrying enormous emotional weight internally. And eventually, solitude stopped being just isolation. It became regulation. When life overwhelms you emotionally, you disappear for a while. You retreat inward, not necessarily because you dislike people, but because your nervous system needs space to process everything safely. Maybe others misunderstood that. Maybe they called you distant, cold, detached, too quiet. But what they never saw was how much emotional stimulation your mind was already carrying every single day. People with deep emotional intelligence absorb more from environments than they realize. Conversations linger, disappointments echo. Small emotional experiences leave lasting impressions, especially if you grew up believing your feelings were something you had to manage privately. Children who feel emotionally unsafe often become adults who process pain alone. They learn not to burden others, not to ask for too much, not to create conflict, so they become emotionally self-contained. But self-containment creates a strange kind of loneliness. You become the person everybody assumes is fine because you learned how to hide distress quietly. And sometimes your intelligence strengthens that habit. You can explain your pain logically. You can analyze your wounds clearly. You can understand your trauma intellectually while still feeling emotionally trapped inside it. That is the paradox many self-aware people experience. Awareness alone does not heal the nervous system. You can understand why you fear abandonment and still panic when somebody pulls away. You can recognize unhealthy attachment patterns and still repeat them. You can know your anxiety is irrational while your body continues reacting as if danger is real. Because healing is deeper than explanation, and somewhere along the way, you may have mistaken your sensitivity for weakness, your overthinking for brokenness, your emotional depth for something unhealthy. But many of those traits were adaptations. Your mind became observant because unpredictability forced it to become observant. Your emotional awareness sharpened because your environment trained you to notice subtle changes. Your solitude became comforting because peace was easier to find alone than around emotional chaos. None of that makes you weak. It makes sense. There's another thing highly intelligent people often do privately. They rehearse future conversations in their head, future arguments, future confessions, future losses, future reunions, not because they are pretending, because their mind is trying to reduce uncertainty before it arrives. People who experience emotional unpredictability early in life often develop the habit of mentally preparing for situations before they happen. The brain believes preparation might reduce pain, but eventually constant anticipation becomes exhausting. You stop fully resting in the present because part of your mind is always scanning ahead emotionally, and most people never notice that exhaustion. They simply see someone thoughtful, quiet, reserved, not someone carrying multiple emotional possibilities inside their head every moment. And then there's the final thing. You feel deeply affected by moments other people barely register. A certain song at night, a sudden change in someone's voice, sunlight entering a quiet room, an old memory returning for no reason. The silence after laughter disappears. Your brain naturally connects emotion to meaning. That is why certain experiences stay with you for years. Not because you are dramatic, but because your mind processes emotional detail intensely. Depth like that can feel isolating sometimes, especially when you start wondering why you feel disconnected even around other people, why solitude feels both comforting and painful at the same time, why you understand others so clearly while struggling to feel understood yourself. And the answer often traces back to survival. part of you adapted emotionally long before you ever learned how to feel fully safe. That adaptation helped you become perceptive, reflective, emotionally intelligent, deeply aware, but survival and peace are not the same thing. And eventually, there comes a moment where healing requires something different from hyperawareness. It requires softness. Softness toward yourself. Softness toward the frightened parts of you that learn to stay alert constantly. Softness toward the version of you that believed isolation was the only reliable form of safety. Because you do not have to remain emotionally guarded forever just because vigilance once protected you. Your mind learned how to anticipate danger. Now it must learn that not every moment requires protection. Your heart learned how to hide depth. Now it must learn that being understood is possible too. And maybe that is the rarest form of intelligence after all. Not the ability to analyze everything, but the ability to remain gentle after everything your mind has already survived. Because beneath all your observing, overthinking, reflecting, and silent coping, there is still a part of you waiting for permission to stop carrying life entirely alone.